Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Allison. I'm an SRA Hub advisor, and today we are going to talk about 8 rookie mistakes that you should try to avoid as a new grad. And if you're watching this, I'm assuming it's because you're graduating, so congratulations, first of all. And then if you have any questions, of course, feel free to chat them or put them in the chat. Don't raise your hand or put it in the Q&A, just chat them, and then I'll try to answer them at the end. Okay? So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So let's start with the first one. So the first one, or the first mistake, is that new grads stop networking after they start their first job. So what you don't want to do is stop networking, and you don't want to be complacent because when you stop networking, then you're basically limiting the size of who could be a potential contact for another job sometime down the line. So don't be complacent and make sure that you're actively expanding your network, whether that's adding people on LinkedIn or going to career development workshops, stuff like that. So you never want to stop networking. Okay, and then secondly is you want to be an active alum. So what that means is, just make sure that you're keeping in touch with the organizations or internships that you had when you were in college, and making sure that, you give back to your community. So I'm a recent alum. I just graduated from college last year. So, excuse me. Something that I do a lot is I try to give or send job postings to like my friends and the organizations that I was involved in, because I feel like that's a really good way for them to see jobs from the industries or the areas that they might be interested in. So those are the first 2 things: is don't be complacent in networking, always try to expand your network. And then number 2 is to be an active alum. Okay, so number 2 is new grads spend more time on their computer than with people. So it's obviously fine to be on your computer because most people nowadays do a lot of their work on their computers. But what we say, or what we mean by this, is that the best relationships that you can build with people is ones that you build in person. So what you want to do is you want to build your soft skills. So what those are like more general skills, so not hard skills. Not like coding or something like that. They're just very general skills, like, how to problem solve, how to be a better team member, how to communicate more effectively, stuff like that. So you want to make sure that you're always improving those skills. And it's also join a committee. So when you're on, or when you have your first job, especially like really big companies or organizations, they might have different committees that you can join. And those are really good ways for you to meet people that you wouldn't really get to meet otherwise. Thankfully, I work in a very small organization, but if you work at a company that has like thousands of people, those are really good people that you could potentially network with. But if you don't work with them directly, there's no way that you're probably going to be able to meet them. So join a committee. There's all sorts of committees. There's like, some people might create like basketball teams or, make groups for different types of hobbies, things like that. So build your soft skills and join a committee. Okay, and then number 3 is that new grads don't communicate effectively. So I'm sure a lot of you know that communication is like the key to basically all relationships. So what you want to do is you want to keep your work relationships professional. And a lot of new grads make this mistake just because when you're in college, you're used to like sharing a lot with your friends and, being around people who are your age. But once you enter the professional world, you're going to start working with people who are way older than you, or, you're going to be working with an age group that you might not be used to. So this is often a mistake that people make just because they're working with people who are around their age, so they think it's okay. But you want to keep your conversations professional and make sure that, you don't share too much about your personal life. And number 2 is you want to be responsive. So generally what's considered like the most appropriate time to respond to an email is 24 hours or 24 business hours. So you want to be responsive, and if you get an email, try to respond to it as fast as possible. But if you can't respond to the email, as thoroughly as you want to, then what you can do is just send a quick response back saying, hey, I'll get back to you with like a more detailed answer or more thoughtful answer, but just letting them know that you're going to get back to them is enough. So just be super, super, super responsive and prompt with all of your emails and all the messages that you receive. And then about over communicating. So generally, it's better to over communicate than to under communicate. But what we mean by this is that when you're first starting your job, especially if you're like an entry-level employee, your supervisor or your manager, your boss, whoever's in charge of you, they're likely going to want to know what you're working on a lot of the times. So just make sure that you update them on a regular basis saying what you're working on, but make sure to not over communicate. So you don't need to tell them what you're doing every single second of every single day. But, just make sure to update them, and maybe even ask them, how often they want to be updated on, the projects that you're working on. And then lastly is sick and vacation time. So when you start a job, you're going to be given a certain amount of sick days and vacation days. And you just want to give proper notice when you're taking those days off. So if you're sick, obviously, don't just not show up to the office. Make sure that you're communicating with your boss and your team that you're not going to be coming to work that day. And then when you're taking vacation, make sure that you are considering when everyone else is going on vacation. So not everyone is taking time off, and that it's at a time of year that's not super busy. So, you're not missing out on like so many things. And then also to make sure that if you, or it's at a time where you don't really have that much stuff that needs to be covered. So, you can either take care of stuff in advance, or if you need coverage for things that you need to take care of, then to, come up with a plan well in advance and talk to your team members about it and how you're going to split up the work. So just give proper notice when you take your sick days and your vacation days. Okay, so new grads bash the boss. So this is a big problem, especially for people who are just starting off in the professional world, and it completely makes sense, like having your first full-time job, you might not be used to the environment and you might not like your boss and what they're making you do. So it's super common, but it is very important not to complain or, make it known that you don't like your boss. And it is your job to make your supervisor look good. So it's up to you to make an impression on them. So one of the best ways you can do this is, just try to get to know your boss's like managing style. So, try to get to know how they make decisions, kind of how they like to manage projects or deadlines, just kind of get an idea of their style of working. And then through that, you can kind of tailor how you do your work to their needs. And then last but not least, you want to establish a good working or a positive working relationship with your boss. So, if you kind of get off on a rough start with your boss, no one likes to have negative energy in the office. So one way you could remedy this problem is just to, schedule a meeting with them, be very professional, and just, go over your concerns, what you're feeling, and then hopefully that can serve as a way for you two to kind of come to a middle ground, or, communicate to each other how you can support each other best. Okay, so the next one is that new grads assume good work will be recognized. Okay, so you want to understand that perception is reality. So not everyone is going to recognize all of the good things that you accomplish at your work, basically. But the way to get around this is that you really have to make your own accomplishments known. So you just doing a good job and putting a lot of effort into stuff, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're automatically going to get recognized for that, which is kind of sad, but it's unfortunately just the reality of things. So, just make sure that you make it known what big accomplishments that you had. Say like you organized this really big event. It was like the most successful event of the year for your company, or the most successful event for that industry or area of work. And then brush up on your business etiquette. So a good example of this is you don't really want to change your company culture, right? So don't try to establish your own working hours. Try to dress similar to how everyone else dresses. You don't want to like stick out like a sore thumb, but you also you want to play by the rules, and then that will also make sure that you get recognized for the hard work that you do. Okay, and the last one is practice self-awareness. So just be conscious of what other people think of you in the office. Make sure that you're always putting your best foot forward, having a positive attitude, smiling, because having that type of demeanor will go a long way compared to someone who kind of always carries like negative energy. So just be aware of your actions and how you treat other people, and then that will hopefully help you get more recognized. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the fact that new grads don't plan for performance reviews. So performance reviews are basically conducted usually at the end of the fiscal year, or it might be at the beginning of when you first start your job. And basically with performance reviews, it's usually like a self-evaluation where you answer just a bunch of questions and then you give that to your manager or your supervisor, and then they'll review it, and then you'll sit down and have a conversation about it. So that's usually how it goes. But for some people, they don't necessarily have to do reviews, or they don't have to have evaluations. But if you're in that boat, you should definitely try to make one just for yourself. So make your self-evaluation a priority. And the reason why this is really important is because you can kind of gauge how much you accomplished over how many months you were working there so far, or what areas you need to improve on. And then you can if you do this as a mandatory assignment, then you can kind of work with your team and your manager or your supervisor to come up with a plan to help develop your career path. But if you're not, that's fine, just do it for yourself. And a way that you can kind of build up your self-evaluation, or to make it as effective as possible, is to track your accomplishments. So like I said, a lot of these reviews are done at the end of the year, and by that time a lot of people kind of forget all the things that they've done over the year. So if you have like a very strong accomplishment, or you achieve a milestone or something, you want to make note of that, so you have that for your self-evaluation or your performance review. Okay, and then another good question to ask yourself is, what do you want to be in 5 years, or where do you want to be in the next 5 years? So if you have a plan of you want to climb up the career ladder and be a manager one day, be a director one day, something like that, and you want to work in a very specific field, that's something that's really good to keep in mind for your review, because you can talk to your boss about it, and then they can help you, or they can help guide you towards being in that position. And then, if you don't know the steps for those things, make sure that you research them. So, maybe you need like a certain education to be a director or a manager. So you have to go to grad school, or you have to have a certain, certification or a very specialized training or something. And if that applies to you, then that's something that you should look into, and that you should get help from your company or your boss. Okay, and then from that, outline a career development plan, like I said, and then request support from your boss. So, most bosses, I think, are very much all about trying to make their staff as best as possible. And so most bosses, I think, are more willing to help their staff develop their careers and their skill sets and stuff. So don't be afraid to ask, if they know a friend who can help you connect to doing something in this field or stuff like that. Okay, so before I go on, before I forget, let's do the attention check. Hopefully you all are paying attention. So it should pop up on your screen now. And just take a couple seconds to complete it. Okay, just waiting on a few more people. Okay, well, I'll leave it up on the screen for a little bit. All right, so let's go back to the presentation. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so the next one is that new grads leave their first job too early and burn bridges. So nowadays, job hopping between jobs is becoming more and more popular. So a lot of people are, only staying at jobs for a couple of months up to a year, and then they're leaving to go somewhere else, which is fine. But if it's your first job, you definitely want to stay at it for at least 18 months is at least what we suggest, just because that helps you kind of, it shows that you're very loyal and dedicated to the company or organization, instead of, if you're job hopping, that can negatively impact your professional image if you're bouncing around between jobs just for months at a time. Okay, and if and when you decide to quit, make sure that you put in your 2 weeks, as a lot of people say, to give 2 to 3 weeks notice when you quit. And usually when you quit a job, you'll have an exit interview where you talk about, just your experience being an employee at the company or the organization. And then they'll ask stuff like, how they can improve certain things for their employees, things like that. So in your exit interview, or not even just at your exit interview, but in the future, don't badmouth anyone that you worked with. So your coworkers, your boss, your managers, your CEO. You don't want to badmouth anyone, just because down the line, you never know, you might be working with those people again somewhere else, or they might be helping hire you at a different company. So you just want to make sure that you're keeping it very professional and you don't badmouth anyone. And then lastly is you want to show gratitude. So on your last day or your last week, just make sure that you say that, you're very appreciative of the experience, that you grew a lot, and to make sure that you leave your contact information with them should they have to contact you for anything. So don't just vanish on your last day. Make sure that you show gratitude, say thank you for the opportunity, say your goodbyes, and then move on to your next job. Okay, I believe this is the last one. And this one is that new grads think going to grad school is the best way to continue learning. So before you go to grad school, you definitely want to consider if grad school really is right for you. And, unfortunately, financial aid for graduate schools it's shrinking more and more every single year. And a lot of people are going into debt after graduate school, which, the logic is if you go to graduate school, you're going to get a higher paying job or a higher position at a company or an organization, but that's not necessarily true. So if you're thinking about going to graduate school, make sure that the career you want requires it, basically, and that you're actually really investing in your education. Okay, and graduate school isn't the only way to continue your learning after you receive your bachelor's. So you want to take advantage of continuing education opportunities sponsored by your job. So a lot of companies will waive the fee for you to take a course on something or to take a class on something. You know, if you're learning how to code, for example, if you're learning a very technical skill, a lot of companies will pay for that course for you, so you can have that personal or professional development for free. So that's something that you should definitely take advantage of. Or if you don't have that at your work, you can also just sign up for an online course. There's tons and tons of free content out there, free and not free stuff that you have to pay for, but there's a lot of content nowadays on the internet and you just have to go and find it. So you can sign up for one of those. And then you can also learn at your own pace with iTunes U. So if you don't know what iTunes U is, it's basically like a bunch of educational content that you can access. I believe some of it's free or it might be free, but you should definitely check that out if you want to learn about something very specific. And then lastly, you can find a mentor. So of course, going back to the whole networking thing, you can go to a social thing, a mixer, just any event that will help you expand your network, and then that you can find someone who hopefully is in the same shoes that you want to be in somewhere in the future, and then you can contact them and be their mentee. So I think that's it. I know that was a lot packed into one webinar, so if any of you have any questions, feel free to type them in. But if not, I'm going to launch the post poll. So it should pop up right now. So just take a few seconds to answer that. And I hope that this webinar was really helpful for you. Like I said, I also just graduated from college a year ago. So, it's all a learning process, but, I hope that this was a good glimpse into what post-grad life is like for you. And I definitely wish that I had watched something like this when I was first starting my job, because I think it would have helped a lot. So I hope that you all learned a little something today. Okay, well, there's no questions. I'm going to end it here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you on the hub. Bye.